read the book twice. I have.
Oh, twice now.
Yeah, I listened to it twice, but it's been a little while, and so it was getting old. The cobwebs were there, so I had to do a quick refresher.
Yeah.
Hey guys,
Hey, Michael.
good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
How are things going in your land?
Not too bad. I was just wondering if you ever changed the top shelf. You notice that mine doesn't change much. Do you ever change the top shelf back there?
Not really. I mean, every once in a while it might move because I pick one of those back up, and so
Yeah.
those are a lot of them are novels. The ones you can't see on this, actually, you can see a little bit of it on that end. Those are references, and then just old resources up there. So.
Yeah, I started culling my library last fall, and I got about 9 boxes in, and then I gave up.
When I moved offices, I did that, and I probably took about 5 boxes of books home that I thought, these maybe were good for the moment, but these aren't ones that I'm going to keep. And then I curated some, and I've got them over here in like this special section, like the top shelf type books. And I was just really going through going, man, these really had a profound impact upon me, and I don't think I would be the person I am today without them. So.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
All right, guys. Well, let's jump in. I did get a message from John saying that he would not be here, or that he would probably not be here. And then I don't have a message from Nathaniel, but I know that there's a variety of things in the middle of the day that may sometimes stop him from getting here if he hasn't communicated in advance. So,
Michael,
yeah, go for it.
President Kervin's on a medical leave.
Oh no.
Yeah. We knew that last time already, but we hadn't got official communication to make it public yet.
Okay.
So, so we're not sure how long he's off, but for several months. So, I mean, that's adding a little more workload to Nathaniel and the rest of us a bit. So just a heads up on that one.
What's he facing?
We have no information, direct information.
Oh man.
Yeah. And being on medical leave, there are certain things in our system in Canada anyway, that the person can't have contact, with the organization and stuff like that. So Kervin's given us a private, way, but he can't talk about work. He can't talk it. And so right now I haven't reached out to try and connect with him, but I think each one of us will do that at some point. But there's restrictions on what you want to talk about. So.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. Do you guys feel like you've got the proper orientation from, I don't know what accountability Kervin has, is if there's a board or a council or something like that he's accountable to, but do you guys have the direction you guys need, or does it feel a little scattered?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Good.
No, he gave us directives that we should take responsibility, and then John has been asked by the national board to be team leader, not interim president, but team leader.
Yeah.
At this point, so he'll sign documents and stuff like that.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Well,
but we have still Team Jesus as our leader. So we heard he's still doing okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're good. Kingdom business as usual.
Yep.
There you go.
In the mess of it all.
All right. Well, here's where we're going to go. We've got new content, chapters 3 and 4 today. Content Huddle. So you guys know the drill. We're mainly unpacking the book, looking for general kairos from the content. I'm also trying to make sure that some of the deliverables that we're wanting to make sure that we're discussing and understanding are there. What I'll do is assuming that the conversation goes away, I'm kind of planning there'll be that point where I'll probably go back and show a brief version of my gospel, and then from my gospel, take you to the 2 horizons and just show you practically how that works. I'm assuming because you guys have gone through this stuff in the learning community, that's stuff you've already seen modeled for you, but I'll show that to you, give a chance to be able to get a little feedback. And then again, since we're kind of making this, developing it as we go, I want to say making it up as we
Making
go.
it up, yeah.
Developing it as we go. I know that this is the tool, the Two Horizons tool is what we're looking at for this chapter. And I think that, I don't know, in my mind, and maybe you guys can give some feedback to this, I think it's a helpful tool, but I don't know that it's one of those memes that is part of the big toolkit. And so you guys can give some feedback on that as a whole. I think that maybe it's just too simplistic. I think that's the problem. Mike talks about that it should be simple, repeatable, and all that. I think this one may be too simplistic, but it's super helpful in its right place. So maybe I'm overstating it. So you guys can help decide that. So let's catch up with one another. How things been going in the last 2 weeks time frame since we last met. So since we last met, I gathered together with our national leaders for the Pacific Coast Collective in Seattle. So had a good time there. We're continuing to develop kind of our strategic plans out of when we were together in Phoenix with you guys. And so we're looking at the possibility of developing a coaching infrastructure that we can utilize with all of the pastors in the Pacific Coast. The current idea on the table is that all 7 of us would go to huddle 7 other people. You guys kind of know that idea. And I developed a coaching framework, like some of the type of stuff that I've shown you guys, that is both Church of God and 3DM. And we're looking at the possibilities of using that and multiplying that out. So I just presented that, a formal presentation to the team on Tuesday on one of our Zoom calls. And so we're dicing it up and chewing it up and trying to figure it out. I think in similar ways, where you guys are trying to find Way of Jesus and 3DM and how they work together. There's some of that going on. And then I think the other, we've got buy-in to 3DM at national levels, but it's not 100%. So whereas my assumption, at least where I've started to play with you guys, is that everybody in your regional minister team and national offices are ready to go utilizing these tools in other ways. Like we're like, okay, these are really good, but maybe we are, maybe we aren't. And what about these other ones? And so there's still a little bit of that going on in our place. So sorry, much longer than 1 minute, not necessarily good for modeling, but that's the full loop kind of circle there. So Claren, catch us up, buddy.
Yeah, what have I been doing? So out speaking on weekends, that's been going well. Just making lots of contact with pastors. This is annual report time. There's extra work a bit with that. There's I got a lot of churches in transition, talking to a few more pastors that are considering, are their time done? So yeah, just with Curvin being off, there's been extra stuff there as we've been having extra meetings trying to figure out what now. So I'm a little swamped. Just had a horrendous phone call this morning from somebody belly aching about some pastor, and anyways, and so that was and he wanted to be anonymous, right? So trying to figure out the real situation, and anyway, so that was a mess. But anyway, so got that finally kind of settled.
Yeah.
Anyways, so stuff like that. Just, what a time waster. Whatever.
I noticed your shepherding heart there, Claren. It just comes on so clear.
I know.
Well, Lynn, pick up the baton from there. Why don't you see if you can top that one?
I can't. Okay, well, I was scraping 2 guys off the ceiling this morning, so that was after our conversation, Claren.
Oh, okay.
After prayer time. So yeah, I just spent about 45 minutes with a guy on the phone. Get off the ceiling. And I was talking with his pastor too. It's like, it was an AGM that just really went sideways last night. So just unpacking that with these guys, trying to help them see that this too shall pass, maintain a bold bearing, follow the attitudes, behaviors, and character of Jesus. You know, the whole spiel. Yeah, so that's part of it. Prior to that, you know, there's stuff with coaching pastors, having good conversations, meeting with other boards of other churches that are doing fine and are tracking fairly well. And then I had a pastors network group here a little bit ago where just unpacked I'm scraping myself off the ceiling here. You know how it jacks you up, right? The John 15 passage, rest and abide.
Abide
And fruit. And fruit.
Yeah. Abiding and fruit bearing. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks guys for helping him out with that particular tool. Anyway, so that was good. Good response to it. And just, you know, I am finding with the infusion of 3DM tools into our Way of Jesus structure and platform, very helpful.
Good.
Reproducible, and my disciple guys are reproducing it, so it's good. And what I found with this Pastors Network group, and some of these guys are not part of a imitation dynamic, is that they really take to the use of the passage with that particular half circle tool. It caught. And one pastor goes, you know what? I think what I'm hearing from the Lord is that I do much better when I have rhythms. And it was kind of an aha moment for him. Like, I need rhythms. I'm just kind of scattered. So anyways, just to be able to embed that along the way has been good.
That's awesome. Mr. Brian, catch us up, buddy. What's been happening in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, so actually last week, we as regional ministers met and we did some refining of the scope and sequence for Way of Jesus. And I really appreciated the input on there. So we've got something that probably still is going to do a few tweaks, but I think it's moving forward in a great way that can become a usable tool. I think secondly, that you know, you said all of our national team is on board. Well, yeah. I do think that the regional ministers and the president kind of are, but the rest not necessarily. So I've been recognizing we have some siloing and stuff that we need to work on. I just caught your comment there, so I just wanted to say that. The next thing, just short, my last huddle with this group that I'm trying to kind of move to the next level, that they're out on their own, developing their own stuff. So I was sitting with a guy and we were doing our Kairos moment through 2 Timothy 2:1-7. And I asked what God was saying, and he just kind of, for a couple minutes, like he couldn't say anything. And then he basically comes out. I shared a little bit about my journey and some of the stuff God was saying to me. And then he came and he goes, "That's it. I've been doing this all wrong for 25 years. And so we're all kind of stopping there. I guess I called this a super Kairos, that he was, you know, all of us around the group knew he was struggling with his rhythms.
Wow.
And actually his identity, where he was getting his identity from. And so all of a sudden, God used this passage to just, you know, dive the knife in and start digging it out. And so it was kind of one of those expressions of I wouldn't even actually have thought that this would be the passage that God would bring that out for him. But it was 2 Timothy 2:2.
Wow.
And so God brought that out in I think a really fabulous way. He's on a journey really shifting from performance to relationship, which is a huge shift for him, and just the way he's made up as well. So
Wow, that's
that was
awesome.
good.
Super good. I question on, go back a step. So RMs and president are on board. What other national leaders do you have? I'm not quite sure how you guys are structured.
We have a world partners director and assistant director. We have a communications director. And then we have some admin staff along with that. And so those people have not been included
Gotcha.
in our journeys as much. And I think that's to our detriment in some ways. You can't make people come along, but it's to our detriment a little bit in some ways that they haven't been involved.
Well, I remember Bob bragging about like what you guys were doing in terms of like, I think most of your first exposure was Holy Land's trip. Is that the case, or early?
Yeah, I had an earlier exposure to 3DM when they first came to Canada. Bob came, or Mike came. Actually,
wow.
Mike came to Canada, to Calgary. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, a workshop. I read a couple books.
Yeah.
And then Kervin introduced Bob.
Wow.
And the 3DM Phoenix.
Yeah.
One. So.
Okay.
And I read 3DM books along, like some of the early books, like I don't know how many years ago, way back. So that gave a predisposition towards it. Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
The other ones, the other staff, the other directors, they would be all aligned up in the idea of disciples making disciples, the Way of Jesus platform. They're just not up to speed really on the 3DM tools.
Well, and I would go as far to say, are they involved in some disciple making journey? Joel may be a little bit, but William isn't.
Yeah. Joel really lives on mission. Like he's family on mission. Joel's got that down.
Yeah, family on mission is something that's pretty strong on.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, let's dive into the content today, and let's go through. I won't do a summary. I'll just open it up and say what caught your attention, chapter 3 and chapter 4. We'll even do both at one time.
You know, I think for me, what caught my attention was his use of Dawkins, and that's right at the end of chapter 4, right?
Yeah.
But the communication methodology that he got from Richard Dawkins, I thought was quite amazing. It really has, in some ways, impacted the way I look at things, and I still haven't integrated it as much as I need to.
Yeah.
But I thought it was very important stuff for us as we're even developing some of our own quote unquote stuff. So.
Yeah. And so I'm looking at the segment now. Is that what those 3 descriptors that he uses for genes? And then
how to make a meme. It's right at the end of chapter 4 that he goes into Dawkins' simple analogy of a gene. Yes, sorry, that's right.
The adaptability, longevity, and fecundity.
Yeah, and then he goes through some of the other stuff adapted from that. Yeah.
Awesome. Yep, good stuff. I know that next one, the Wiersbe, has always been really helpful for me. Mm-hmm. And then I've noticed that that's a good litmus test. The things that really are, long-lasting memes are the ones that can be used in all 3 of those angles. So, yeah, good info.
Yeah, that's good.
Somebody else want to jump in? What else caught your attention?
I'm a list guy. So I liked at the end of chapter 4, then his long list of check boxes of what makes for to evaluate a meme. So where he pulls all those things together from different sources there, which I think it's a little long list, but
it's long. Yeah.
It's good. It was interesting then to know that it was Wearsby that came up with the picture of the mirror of the window.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either. In
Yeah.
fact, I first heard it from 3DM folks, so I
Yeah.
think it was a 3DM originated concept. So
Yeah. Yeah, I would have thought so too. And then I thought, oh, that's where, yeah, everybody borrows, right?
yeah, I know. Christian stealing.
I certainly find this concept of meme feeling complex or something. I don't know. Like I rebelled it. My insides kind of rebelled. Read through the first time. Read it through the second time. Kind of not sure what's up with that.
Are you able to put a finger on the why? There's any pushback or resistance?
So, anyway, well, yeah, I was having trouble with that, and so I said, well, okay, Lord, what are some memes that I actually have used, or what are some phrases or expressions that I've used over the years as a pastor and Christian leader? And so I jotted down some of them, and I thought, okay, well, yeah, maybe I am getting this, and maybe this does make some sense. Maybe these haven't been the greatest memes that I've used or whatever, but I definitely know that, I would hear some of these things repeated by my parishioners like years later. Like even like I even pastored up. I've been RMing for over a decade now, and I still bump into some of the old parishioners, and the odd time a expression will come out, and it was something that I used, right? So, okay, that it stuck.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I think after that, then I kind of settled down and said, okay, I believe this, right? I believe this is helpful. And so it was just, yeah, anyway, so I kind of flipped past that. I still find it kind of maybe complex to try to think about how to develop them.
Yeah, it's an art form, which I think is where the list, I was going to add this to your statement about the list. It's long, and hey, maybe this would take a long time, but I think that's even somewhat of his point, that the development process, which is like excavation, so you may have an eruption moment or an erosive moment or an earthquake like he talks about with Sally's, but it's the excavation process. And even in the story, you can tell it took a long time until the meme Family on Mission showed up.
Right.
So it almost is like part of the gold that we discover. And so that there might be a big litmus test that it goes through, and goes through multiple iterations even, I think is probably even the point. And that should be something as communicators that we carry. And I appreciated that he had said I had done this intuitively, but it was very difficult to figure out how to be able to communicate this in a way that I could give imitation toward. So.
Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm still having a hard time kind of catching how he's trying to reproduce this, right? How he's trying to get my head around what he's trying to say of how to develop this.
Yeah.
Claren, you need to go on social media more. They're all over the place.
Well, you know what? Honestly, that was my sticky one. I kind of had some pushback because of the word meme. So my introduction to the word meme was internet based. And so I couldn't quite understand these dumb pictures and phrases that were on the internet that were shareable that like had to do with communicating the gospel. So it took me a long time. And I think I needed to almost have this proof that there was substance behind it. And it wasn't just a cool term Mike was trying to use to relate to people. That's, I think, how I first used it to go, oh, wait, no, there's substance. There's scholarship back behind this idea. So this mimetic concept is actually a thing. And so, so that was very helpful for me.
See, that is a description of Brian. I just want to let you know.
It kind of looks like Brian. That's a nice smile.
Does.
Me.
Yep. And see, carries a packet of information that can be delivered and shared, easily transferable. Is it sticky enough, And it is funny when you really even go to the internet memes that there are some where I'll think about it, or, you watch it and you crack up the first time and you're like, I am really laughing out loud right now. And you're watching it again and again and again. And So there is something about it, and all that to just get at, we're wired for this type of communication. Evidence your people still use language that you had used from years and years ago. So somebody else want to jump in?
I think I'm the only one left, so I guess I'll jump in. Yeah, I'm still struggling with the whole meme thing, but as I ponder it and read it and think about it, I'm going, oh, that's what that is. Oh, well, I know that. Oh,
There you go. Yep.
that's what that is. Oh, okay. You're just putting a language. Oh, that's what that is. So it's like you live in this and you experience it, but then to have someone come along and say, well, it's a meme. And I go, well, I said, well, no, that's a meme. No, meme. Say it. Like, so here's where it really began to catch with me the importance of memes. And that is, I was talking about attitudes, behaviors, and character of Jesus. That's one of our markers of the way of Jesus. And I was talking about how the word glory, doxa, actually is the word reputation in Scripture, and how the culture of Jesus' day was all about reputation. So what was common in the culture around the coffee table, well, whatever, wine tables, was, how, how's your reputation? It's that kind of thing. Well, that came to be the word glory or glorify. And so I was talking about how, we need to glorify God, and what is our reputation, and who do we glorify through our reputation? Well, so I was saying this, and then what came to me is, I'm going to put up a picture on the overhead, and I'm going to ask the congregation, the PowerPoint. Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a long time. No.
I wondered.
Here are my felt characters.
And so then the flannel graph went up on the board.
Yep.
So I put up a picture of Mother Teresa, and I said, tell me what you see. And all of a sudden, right from, all they saw was a picture of an old wrinkled woman's face, and immediately they began to fire up love, compassion, care, selflessness, and it was like it just kept rolling. I'm going, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I don't even have to preach on this. I just put up a picture and say, what are you getting? Tell me about this. What reputation does this person have?
Yeah.
So I'm going, that is really powerful.
Yeah.
And so that whole idea of finding that picture, finding that communicable piece, boy, it absolutely does work.
Yep. So it feels like we're kind of on the same page there. I feel the same way. Like, oh, you're just trying to describe that thing that I do, but I've never used a word to describe that. And I think then, to your point with that picture, it's worth the time, effort, and energy to develop and hone that picture, that image, that phrase, so that when it's communicated, all of the time and energy that you've spent in the process of development and the desire you have for transferability is sticky. And so,
I would just add, meme, the word is a cultural generational word that us folks don't get, but people in coming up generations absolutely understand.
yeah.
And you don't even have to put a list in front of them for them to say what a good meme is.
Yeah.
They absolutely know it instinctively.
You're right. And they have tools to develop them readily available to them,
Exactly.
even bad memes. Like, it's just like the sky's the limit. Here, create stuff that communicates information. Yeah. And it tends to live in the land of, humor, and, it's got this comedy side to it that it tends to live. But we know that memes can be used for drama, for, deep impact, for tragedy. I mean, it is pretty powerful. It can be used for all emotions and angles, but it tends to live and be born in this comedy realm, at least from what I can see. Except for that lady. Remember the ones that was going around last year, at the end of last year, the two ladies that were like yelling like crazy, and then there was the white cat sitting at the end of the like business table glaring back at them. Again, I mean, just what a stupid idea, really, from a visual vehicle, but yet look at all of the information that was laid over the top of that, again, was funny, was used politically, it was used in so many different ways. So it's interesting. Okay, let me share a screen here. Was somebody going to jump in? I couldn't tell who that was.
Yeah, what's social media?
Oh man, hey, I've got another huddle class in just a little bit. If you go to myspace.com, you can find me right there.
Oh my! Oh wow! Oh my goodness!
Oh, that's so good. It is pretty crazy, right? How we're only each generation. There's so much distance between each generation anymore. And I'm hearing that generations are getting shorter in duration. It's not just a biological generation. You've got cultural generations that are so much shorter because so much information is readily available. So pretty wild times, pretty exciting times too. Okay, I'm going to do a small little version here. I'm not going to try to teach it for content, but just to remind you and give you an example. Put a couple of different boxes inside of boxes here so that we can see it. Whoa, not that one. So we can see it lived out. Come on there. Give me a box. That one, and I'll do one more. Main point is that there's kind of, in a sense, this growing depth of understanding, experiencing the gospel, and then again, as we move into this two horizons, communicating what God is revealing to us. So this is about God revealing himself. And so for me, I developed the kind of theme behind it a little bit more with you guys on this first box. I talked about how there was majesty that I experienced in the Lord. There was forgiveness in this early phase, and there was grace that I received. And all of those things, blended together to just deeply impact me. And when I look back, I said stories. I shared scriptures. I crafted sermons, gave my testimony. And though I may not have used those three words each time, they were sourced in that. I had to keep telling people these things that were happening in my life, especially as I had a responsibility to eventually do that. Luke 7:47 then began to be this really mimetic verse for me, this idea that he who is forgiven much loves much. I went through the wrestling match that this was a female that I was identifying. There was this gendered component to it. Like, no, this applies to anybody. This isn't just about her story. This is my story. And I think all of that was excavation. Again, this long, like wrestling with and trying it on and owning it and then preaching it and again, just going back and forth. And what happens from here is that when we have, and this is going to be a harder one for me to do possibly, but when we have something like this majesty, forgiveness, and grace of God exemplified through Luke 7 that comes about, then we want to make sure that like our experience of what we're coming against or coming up against, we can test it against these two horizons. So we've got the Old Testament, this mountain on the left-hand side of all that God has been doing from the beginning of creation as he revealed himself to the fathers and, brought about this kingdom through all these kings and then through seasons of exile and then ultimately revealing himself in human form, in God incarnate. And then the New Testament and all that carries about this big idea that God has to restore the relationship, pay the price to bring us close to him, but then also to call us into this family business of kingdom restoration and see the kingdom come to earth now and then to be with him forever. And so if you kind of picture yourself as a character, let's say here's Michael, I'm thinking about, God's work in my life. and all that he's done, and remember that early phase, and I kind of look back over the horizon of the Old Testament, and I think, gosh, yeah, look at the way that God moved. It was a different form of forgiveness and grace with the patriarchs, but the way that his grace was upon Abraham, and the goofy decisions that he made, and he lied, and yet God's grace is for him even through it all. I can see my story connecting to the story of Abraham. Look at Noah. Noah's a righteous man. That didn't mean he was perfect, but his heart was set apart for the Lord. And then again, decisions that he made that didn't exactly mirror the heart of God. They weren't perfection. I think that was a key thing. Maybe that's the antithesis for me, is that the grace of God, the forgiveness of God was for broken people. I kind of had this assumption that the Bible and Christians were these perfect people. And I think he was breaking something down. So I can see that my story and this thing that I feel like God's been revealing to me, I can see it all throughout the Old Testament, and time permitting, I could literally go through probably book by book and find those key themes evidenced all over in the Old Testament. And then, you do the same thing. Do I see that in the New Testament? And if you literally if we were to, I listed a few, so I'll write them down. So if we were to just go through and talk about Noah and Abraham and David, I relate to David's life and the decisions that he made and the forgiveness that he received and the confession. And then, as I look at then Peter, oh gosh, that time where Peter, depart from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man. I get that. The woman, in this Luke 7 passage who is wiping her, Jesus' feet with her hair. And, you could just go on and on. There's so many people and stories and narrative and concepts and themes that I can pull from either mountain that sits to the right and to the left that we find ourselves in the midst of. This is I'll use a different color to depict this. The reason why we kind of find wrong tool. We find ourselves here in between these two is that this is the wider meta-narrative that we are a part of. The meta-narrative of God revealing himself through the Hebraic scriptures. The meta-narrative that our story finds meaning and purpose in is in the context of this story of the Old Testament and the New Testament. And so especially if I'm going to communicate to an audience that finds itself in a culture shaped by that meta-narrative, then I can utilize this language to communicate, not only telling the stories of myself and of Noah and those connections, but then from Noah, I can connect to their stories, even by sharing my own story. So let me just pause right there at that point to just ask for any feedback, input, questions, stuff like that.
So that's really where we're seeking to make sure what the meme is actually
Grounded in the meta-narrative.
Story of God, the biblical accuracy, or whatever you want to say, of the solidness of theology that would be around those concepts. Basically what you're saying. Yep.
That's one element of what I'm saying. So there's this proof texting that you're doing. Is this story, is it just random and one-off? Does it find itself in the wider meta-narrative that I'm planted in? Yep. And then what happens, Mike says that as you do this work, and again, this happened to me intuitively. The story of Luke 7 captured my heart. I'm thinking about it more. I'm meditating in it in a way. I'm preaching from it. All those things I'm doing are a process of excavation. And then what happened is my confidence grew, my clarity grew, and then he has another C that I can't remember off the top of my head. I think conviction allowed me greater faith to leverage as I preached and communicated. So those things are important to hone. And again, this is, how do you take, just like Lynn said, oh, this is that. I do this thing. Now it's just giving language to it. This is the process of taking a concept that God's revealed to me, finding it in the wider meta-narrative, so that I know that I have the authority of the scriptures back behind me. The patriarchs and the early church fathers are behind me. And now I'm communicating this big story that we all find ourselves in. Let me explain this one. I'm going to look at my notes real quick. This was a hard one. So I think the culture around me of the church was easy for me to discover the majesty, forgiveness, and grace of God. That was like a normal first level experience, I think, of who God was. This one was not easy because it was, let me get this last word in here, because this was not the norms in the circles that I ran in. And so this is where kind of the proof texting comes into play. And I spent a long time leaning into my teacher kind of ministry, digging into scripture to go, where in the Old Testament do you see this stuff? You know, because I think I told you guys this part of the story. I got healed, and the healing was the mountaintop experience, the eruption that catapulted me into this. I already had this background of covenant and kingdom, and that experience with the community of 3DM and Bob and Mike and these people like speaking the words of scripture over me and helping me to grow into my identity. But then I got healed, and it changed things. Now it's that badge and gun concept, and I'm trying to learn this, and I'm feeling like, but this isn't normal, because this isn't my normal, and this isn't our normal. So I went back to the wider meta narrative that we find ourselves in, and then I find out that, like, okay, I knew that there were prophets, but they're all over, and they are regularly prophesying. And then I look at this, God speaks, and he's regularly speaking to his people, and he loves to do that. And there are certain people like Moses that, man, Moses has some pretty radical encounters. And, oh, wait, there are all these things that are kind of charismatic like that are happening all over. And sometimes they're described in terms that charismatic people might use. Sometimes they're, terms like Isaiah. He is in the presence of the Lord, and the glory of the Lord is filling the temple, and he falls down as if he were dead. That happens. And you see even phrases like that were normative phrases, and like, oh, well, that kind of depicts what these other people experience that is not normal to me. And then, I go to the New Testament, and I'm looking at 1 Corinthians 14, and I had always heard the things not to do. That's the main teaching I had received from 1 Corinthians. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Great, here's all the things you don't do. But in the midst of it, I missed, Paul was saying a bunch of things to do, and it just fit a theological framework that I had. And then, the Peter and John, oh gosh, this killed me. Peter and John at the gate, beautiful. Here they are, and I think we've talked about this. How did he know that was the moment where he could say, in the name of Jesus Christ, stand up and walk? And it confounded me. There had to be some magical recipe. And again, all of this to get out, then I'm learning about how does the Holy Spirit work? How does he speak? I'm looking at gifts of the Spirit. And again, these are all things in this particular case that I knew. But what happened is, by the time I came out on the other side of it, there was a clarity, there was a confidence, and there was a conviction that emerged inside of me as I excavated this out. And then, because I had a responsibility not just to grow in this personally, but to communicate it for other people, this journey allowed me to be able to then here's some memes that come from this. I will speak to you. Will you say what I say? Now, this was a specific kairos that literally I felt like the Lord spoke to me. But what I found is that simple language, not charismatic sounding, that simple language, when I would share my story with other people, that began to be a meme. And then, what evolved was eventually, kind of the name of the book, My Sheep Have Ears.
Yeah.
And then another one that I got this one from Mike. I'm learning and digging in, and it is the birthright of every child. Oh gosh, sorry guys. To hear their father, or hear the voice of their father. Now, if we took these 3 statements through that litmus test, they're probably not honed like to the best degree yet. This one right here is still in its early iteration, but what I found is that one actually is simple enough, and in the right moment, it really does transform things. I share that all the time. And then, you know, I'm using the content of My Sheep Have Ears as a book, but then I'm using that language too. Like, you know, look at what John 10 has to say. Our sheep have ears, and we need to know the voice of our Father. And then this last one, the birthright, because there's this part I've learned in trying to help people hear the voice of God. There are blocks that are in the way, or things, filters that keep us from hearing his voice or thinking that we're hearing his voice. And this one I know is a tool that is able to be leveraged at certain points. So again, they may not be fully formed and developed means, but this is the process. How do I use God's revelation to me and communicate it to people so that an awakening happens at an individual level and at a community level? And this is what the process is like. And I think it's a little bit easier to see it in this realm where I was really pushing for change, and this wasn't the natural theological home that I grew up in. Let me pause there. Any questions, thoughts, feedback?
Yeah, thanks, Michael, for sharing this. I remember us going through this in Phoenix, and they called it the vistas, right, instead of the horizons. So that threw me off a little bit, but I appreciate how you've connected this to the gospel and sharing it. And to me, this is clearer. Even in the workshop that Bob did,
Mm-hmm.
he did bring this up again.
Okay.
Actually, I don't remember if it was Bob or Greg, but whoever did it did an excellent job of mostly putting stuff. What you've done and helped me with is connecting it to my personal story. I didn't always get that connection. I just saw it as a tool that showed how God's message is throughout the Bible. And for whatever reason, I didn't connect it to my personal story. So this is good.
Awesome. That's good to hear. Yeah. And I don't know that I got that connection either. And here's the other one that I'm hoping that you get, is that this is kind of the starting point. You know,
Right.
so how do you discern your gospel? Well, use the landscape of life and figure out what God's been doing and what he is doing. You can kind of see then from the concept here, maybe I'm going to, you know, put words inside of these boxes here, but ultimately what I need to do is change the colors here just so that you can see the differentiation. I need to excavate. Well, what's excavate? Well, that's what I'm doing here. Then when I take it over to here, that's excavation. And then when I take it up here into this clarity, confidence, conviction, all of this is that process of excavation, my story and what God's doing. But I'm a leader and I have a responsibility to communicate to other people so that that can be transferred and awakening can happen. So again, that's Mike's key thesis. How does awakening happen? How do you take this and put it into a nuts and bolts fashion? Here's the journey that oftentimes we're intuitively walking in. We all probably have stories where, oh yeah, I've done that. I just didn't use these things, you know? And it may feel gimmicky, but if we're ever going to teach somebody from the ground up how to do this, not just figure it out on their own, but disciple them to reproduce this, here's at least a methodology to communicate those things.
I don't think we got all this at Fort Wayne.
Again, I don't have the experience that you guys have of having gone through those social spaces. And those leaders that put together the content are trying to take Mike's content, which was brand new, and weave it in. You know, Mike had been leaking the information. He'd been training many of us as he was writing the book and developing the content. And we were like guinea pigs and beta testing a lot of the concepts. And you could watch the means change through the course of that time frame, which is, I'm wondering if Horizons and Vistas was in there. Because I think from the book, I pulled Horizons from the book, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah.
And, but when you said Vistas, I'm like, oh yeah, I think that is what he used in the very first huddle that I was in with him. So we watched it develop, and I think it's just going through that testing to find out, okay, did the way we introduced this actually bring transformation? So again, look at that. What is that process? Exactly what I'm showing you here. They're taking the content and taking it through these processes in a way to be able to figure out, can we see awakening happen in the people that are experiencing these huddles or these learning communities, sorry. I would imagine this might give encouragement and hope to the development of your guys' scope and sequence, your curriculum you're developing. So, hey, we're going to put it in the water. Let's try it out. It doesn't have to be perfect, but make sure that there's a good feedback loop as each of the individuals play with it and you listen to what's going on in there. All of that's really important so that, just like I said here, this may not be at the best iteration of a meme at this point, but it's in a good version right now, and it will just get better. Let it keep getting refined.
So Brian, would a meme in like listen, trust, and obey, would that be kind of one of our memes for?
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, it's in the things that you guys repeat again and again. You know, you can take it again, like I said, take it through the filters. You know, the one that I like is the picture, mirror, and window. And so, does it give me a picture of the way Scripture is revealed? In a way, that's another question of, do I see the two horizons? Yeah, I can see the Scriptures in this. This gives me a window to understand the Bible. You know, look at the early disciples. They listened, trusted, and obeyed. But look at an Old Testament. They walked with God. That was the language that was used there. I can see this all throughout the landscape of the Scriptures. But then mirror, how can I use this? This might be, you need to add a couple of additional tools. You know, this is going to be the question, you know, am I learning to listen? I can't make this stuff up. You guys already have it developed. And then window, does it give me a way to look at the world around me and maybe the leaders around me? I think those are ways to let it get honed even more, hold it loosely. Sometimes the memes I create, they become like babies to me, and I want to protect them. I think that I think what we want to do is we want to hold them, and we've got to be, you know, we know that language defines a culture, so we want to be good and have sticky language, but we also want to not be so protective over our babies that we don't let them grow.
Well, and in effect, I do think even our statements of the way of Jesus are in some ways memes.
Yeah.
But the problem with them is that we've focused on statements as being a memorization point.
Yep.
I think, and trying to develop pictures and other stuff. I think it has like the picture, mirror, window for us. Our statements for those of us who've been traveling with this for 12 to 15 years,
Yep.
It's absolutely there. But the transferability is it doesn't click like that when you see a picture and stuff like that. So anyway, I just am reflecting on this with way of Jesus statements as well, and I think there are some things connected, but there's probably a lot more work to do with that.
Yep, there you go. And then now, so this is what I'm hearing you say. I went back to, I'm just looking at the book right now. I don't have these stored in my memory. Mike's lenses are, is it simple, is it transferable and repeatable? Now you'll see that usually the 3DM tools that get presented have gone through this. You know, there's a simplicity to it. You know, we can teach it in a 3 to 4 minute time frame, depending upon the complexity of the tool. It's, you know, the words aren't too confusing for the most part. It's transferable. I could share it to somebody and ask them to give it back to me. And then it's repeatable. Like I could see it go through iterations and not lose its, you know, it's not going to go through the telephone game and come out as this other thing on the other end. So that's another lens that he uses. And I think this is where Mike says that we live in a visual culture. And so because we live in a visual culture, let's use visual tools to carry all of this content inside of a simple tool, which again, I think what we're doing right here is we're unpacking your guys' journey and where 3DM has been valuable. If I'm remembering correctly, we've had Way of Jesus for 15 years and it's been good. 3DM has given us language and we've been getting further, faster with more people, and it's bringing more life and understanding as we're sharing these concepts. It's still Way of Jesus, but we're using these other tools. And I think because they're simple, transferable, and repeatable, you're seeing more traction come. So, all right. I think that's what I got. Any other questions? Any other thoughts, comments? I don't know that with no, I guess let's do it. Even with 5 minutes, we can take 1 minute and then give a 1 minute report out. What's the thing that maybe God's catching our attention with? This feels like a skills huddle more than a character huddle, by the way. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's, a doing action that maybe we have identified out of it. But let's just take our hearts before the Lord, and then we'll share the key thing that the Lord's catching our attention with. So, Father, we come before you in the name of Jesus. We thank you for all that you're doing and the way you're using this process to help us to grow. And I think Lynn said it well. This is taking things that maybe we already know, but giving some additional language to it so that we can repeat it even more. So come, what are you saying to us, Holy Spirit?
Yeah.
About a minute's time.
I think for me, what caught me, you just said it at the end, is that I have to hold my babies loosely. I think even as we've got a new guy who's trying to create a new kind of card for us, and I think we've got to hold I've got to hold my babies loosely. I think I tend to be like you. I want to protect them and stuff like that. So that's one takeaway for me. I have to hold that loosely.
That's awesome. You're reminding me of the way, like, I've never said that phrase before. That's not a part of the normal curriculum. And actually, I felt like the Spirit of God had even said that. And I was just repeating that same thing. So even while you were stating it, I feel the Spirit of God on me right now, kind of just confirming there's some weight back behind this. So that's awesome. Lynn, Claren, what about you guys?
I guess I'm just really, the simple thing I'm hearing is, Claren, just be a whole lot more open to this, like just and make use of it, like, right? So to think about what our means, as an EMC, or what are some things that I can develop that help, simple, transferable, repeatable spiritual concepts that'll be fruitful in other people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Good. And I think that's just about the things that don't come natural to us, we have to be intentional about. And that's the main thing I'm hearing there. There's some increased intentionality. And I think through my story, because it was not acceptable in the culture, it forced me to study. But what I did was get very intentional about mining some stuff out. Then, what about you?
Well, this is... Oh, no. I am a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And I transfer theology through my stories.
Mm-hmm.
And my experiences. I was just doing that on the phone in 2 different cases today. So, and I get feedback on that. Thank you for sharing your story with me.
Yep.
I understand that I'm a narrative kind of guy. I pull events and things together and unpack a theme through a story.
Yep.
How do I mean that?
You're in a good camp, because Jesus did the same thing, and he used parables. And so in a way, you're using story, and in some ways parables. You can't quite take narratives and say that they are parables, but there's a strong similarity to it. What is the kingdom of God like? Well, it's like, and now he fills in the blank with a story that isn't his personal from experience, but something he can observe and other people can relate to. And so there's an example. So you could do a similar thing. I don't know what circumstance you had. Gosh, I'm having such a difficult time trying to do this with my spouse. We keep getting into this, circumstance. Now you're applying your story, and I'm wondering if there might be a way to hone that. You're already doing it intuitively, and both guys immediately responded with, yep, this is who you are, and this is how you operate, and you're a gift to the body that way. I'm wondering, I don't know, because is there some level of increased intentionality, or is that just the Lord affirming you're doing it?
Well, is the story a meme? It's just a lot of sentences together. Is that a meme?
Did you start with it intentionally? I think this might be introvert and extrovert stuff. Do you extrovert your way to the end and you're surprised that you got there too by the time they're surprised, going, that was really good?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I think this is where the challenge comes in. You can do that intuitively really well because it's your makeup. What if you had, and I don't know what this process looks like, so give me grace here, but you had 5 go-to words that you knew were attached to the story you wanted to deliver in that moment.
Yeah, right.
And again, so the parable of the mustard seed, what we've done is we've titled the story that Jesus had that packs so much to it, but it's a story, the story of the Good Samaritan. Hey, let me tell you the story of, and you've got them. You could, in fact, you probably share the same stories already over and over again.
Yeah.
So maybe if you just went back. That was so funny. But
Yeah.
if you went back, you could probably title them and take these back to the Lord, because you know that there's merit and they keep bringing transformation. And I think then that part of you that is probably a P on the Myers-Briggs and is just really good in the moment, you don't have to plan it all out in advance. You might come with grenades in your toolkit instead of just, finding your way to get there. So you'll have to sift through that, see if there's any appropriate challenge from the Lord in there. But
Well, yeah. So I'm going to have to reverse engineer this.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll see myself in a story, and I'll have to reverse engineer how do I get there, and what at the front end could propel that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Better.
I've been thinking about this as you've been talking, Lynn. And the one thing I've seen you do is sometimes you go back to your family or something like that, and you connect with people because you say something like, and this, you have kids or you have a family, and this is probably a similar situation. This is my story out of it, and here's what I got. Yeah. And the people then take away, it becomes reproducible because you've connected your story to their story. Yep. And that reproduces it and links it and connects it into their lives. So that's just something that I've noticed. Yep. Yeah.
And I think to push it one step further, then the meme would be, you're at the end of that story. You can read the body language. It's penetrating the heart. And then you say this almost pithy statement, it's just like blank. And you let it sit there. And that's the last thing they heard. And that ends up almost being the handle, like the hashtag that they carry the rest of the story through. And then you're not even there. And the Spirit of God is bringing this meme that is delivered in this little phrase to their forefront, and it's bringing transformation. That's what we're talking about mining out and doing, and getting really good at it so that people go, every time I'm with them, gosh, what do they do? How do they? And again, we've honed some of these skills to deliver these goods at the appropriate moment for some end time teaching.
Yeah.
So good stuff, guys. That's awesome. This was super helpful for me. Again, this is like the first time that I've really taught it in this format. It was helpful for me to even see these come out. And I think there was some ahas in here, and then I love getting the feedback from you guys as well. So we will be back on, let's see, I've got different language in my head right now for the second week. Content and then character. In my coaching framework that I'm using for the region, I use content, disciple, leader as different language, because character and competency doesn't always translate to those guys. So,
Michael, February 11th, Brian and I are traveling to Phoenix for 3DM.
Okay.
So
No, that's March 11th.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. March. What?
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I was off.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's March 11th. Yeah.
March 11th. Okay, that's right. That's funny that I didn't include that in my note. I think I had that in my notes, but I must not have transferred the days off. So I'll go back and make some modifications with my notes. If you see anything that comes through and it's still unclear, feel free to speak back into the email and we can help shape the calendar as we move forward. Okay.
John and Clarence will be here, but
Okay.
Brian and I will be on.
Perfect.
And then we will be in Fort Wayne the following week.
Okay. And so we'll flip flop that way.
Yeah.
Okay. What I might do is maybe just do the same huddle with the 2 different groups. So,
Could do that.
okay.
Sure.
All right. Bless you guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael.
Bye.